This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
We have got a massive game in Ann Arbor this weekend as Michigan takes on Texas, and we could not discuss that game without talking to any other person than Dr. Ed Feng. Ed is with us for today to break down Michigan versus Texas, also talking about some season-long interception props he liked, his 60-minute guide to the NFL season, and a whole lot more, getting Ed back in the mix for today. This is Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is Jim Sanas. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, joined here, as mentioned, by Dr. Ed Feng. You can find his work at thepowerrank.com. Check him out on X at thepowerrank. And Ed, it is a delight to have you back on the show for today. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome, Jim. Can't wait for the NFL season. Thank you so much for having me.
I feel weird because we haven't had you on the show for a bit, but I feel like I've talked to you because I listened to you talk for 60 minutes through the 60-minute guide to the NFL season. So even though I haven't had you on the show, I feel like we've kept in touch somehow by you talking at me effectively.
That's great. That was kind of hopefully the plan for the 60-minute guide to the 2024 football season. Thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed tuning into that. I thought there was a good breakdown, not just like of like your process, but kind of, how your numbers work, why they work, and things like that. So we'll talk more about the 60-minute guide to the NFL season. There's a link to that in the show notes over on FanDuel Research. So go there to click to find the 60-minute guide to the NFL season. We'll talk to Ed about that. We'll talk some season-long interception props. We'll talk some week 1 and, of course, college football week 2 as well. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. On yesterday's show, we had Liv Moods on to break down her thoughts on NFL week 1. We talked about her favorite bet for Chiefs versus Ravens, other bets she likes across week 1, and some last-minute futures as well. Later today, Dubs Anderson of FanDuel TV will swing by to break down some more NFL week 1 thoughts, and Megan Payton will swing by on Thursday, talk some NFL player props. So a full week once again here on Covering the Spread. To get those shows as they go live, search for Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe, and if you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating and review as well. And of course, these shows do go up on the FanDuel YouTube page and FanDuel TV Plus as well. Football is back, and there's no better place to get in on the NFL action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now all customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. Plus, with FanDuel, you don't even have to leave the app to access real-time stats and data to help you make even more winning bets. Download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Must be 21 plus and present in select states, or 18 plus and present in DC. Offer ends 9/22/24. After a 3-week free trial, the full price of NFL Sunday Ticket will be automatically charged seasonally. Cancel anytime and no refunds. Terms, restrictions, and embargoes apply. YouTube TV base plan required to watch YouTube TV. Redemption requires a Google account and current form of payment. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, Ed, as I was discussing earlier on, you posted on Spotify a 60-minute guide to the NFL season. You went through a bunch in there. Again, 60 minutes, well worth it. But one of the things most relevant to this week is your process of setting preseason numbers based on power rankings. And I thought that was really interesting, and the way you discussed it was interesting too, and kind of why you think that's a valuable process. So what does that process look like to you, and why do you view this as being your best approach to setting NFL preseason priors?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. So the idea is that we're sitting here, the day before the NFL season starts, and I'm looking at subjective power rankings. And that might seem kind of weird because I'm a data-centric guy and always touting my Stanford PhD. And it's also weird because sports writers are often wrong. You can pick at even the best prognosticators and make fun of their dumb predictions. Like when I predicted USC's defense was going to be fine last season after the debacle at Notre Dame. We all have our mistakes. But what I found is that when you combine the predictions from a lot of different sports writers, you get the wisdom of crowds. No one sports writer is perfect when they're putting out their subjective NFL power rankings, but when you combine, in my case, 20 of them, you actually get a really powerful predictor of team strength. This was not my idea. I actually read about this with when Nate Silver was using the preseason college basketball AP poll in his tournament predictions. And when I first read that, I thought that seemed pretty stupid, but not to be pretty predictive. And then, so I've been using this in my NFL preseason model since 2014. And I only thought like last year to actually check how accurate it was, to just look at, let's look at what this says about the point spreads through the season. I was actually really shocked to discover how accurate it was the first 6 weeks of the season. When you look at predictions that differ from the closing market by 2 points or more, so predictions, games in which the model suggests that you should make a bet, it's actually 54+%. Now, I do not recommend just going and getting this model from my site later today and then betting for the first 5 weeks. NFL spread market is way too tough for that. But what this does suggest is that this wisdom of crowds is an indispensable tool, especially early in the season. It is really important for accurately gauging the strength of teams, figuring out whether the market has shifted off of prior too fast. And sometimes shifting off of prior is appropriate through injuries or play. I give the Los Angeles Rams last year as an example, bottom 5 team heading into the season, but like key pieces are healthy. You add a rookie receiver like Puka Nacua. Okay, yeah, we can move off that prior, right? It also turns out that the wisdom of crowds is shockingly accurate in the playoffs. It's something, it's part of my model still in the playoffs. And going through this research and putting together the 60-minute guide was, it was kind of important to be like, okay, well, yeah, this should be in there in the postseason. And I think I don't know this for sure, but I'm guessing that part of the reason that it's more accurate in the postseason than in the later part of the season is simply injuries. Like if you make the postseason, you probably have the quarterback that you started the season with. You're probably somewhat healthy to have sustained that. But it is a powerful tool and just surprisingly accurate when you look at its spread predictions.
And you talked about in the show about how it could have helped us beyond the Chiefs last year in the playoffs, where if you look at just 2023 data, it's all about the Ravens. Once you sprinkle in some wisdom of the crowd data from the preseason, that would skew you more towards the Chiefs. So I think that does illustrate the power of what you were discussing, where even later in the year, as long as you've got a relative amount of health to keep the teams somewhat congruent with what they were, it can have a lot of predictive value later on as a portion of your prediction. Now, the other thing you discussed there pretty heavily was betting interception props. We talked about it on the show before, but for new listeners, what goes into betting an INT prop for you, Ed?
Right. The main fact that we should start with is that interceptions are pretty rare events. In the NFL, they only happen about 2.5% of the time. It's a rare event, and when you look at the statistics of that, there's just a lot of noise, and it's not particularly predictive. The idea is like, well, can we look at a bigger set of events that's related to interceptions, but gives you a larger set of events to think about? And in the NFL play-by-play, you get passes defended, or all the times in which a defense gets a hand on the ball or potentially jars the ball loose with a hit when it gets to the receiver. So this happens a lot more. Let's see. So about 8 or 9% of the time more. And so the idea is like, hey, we're interested in a rare event. Like, can we get a bigger set of events that helps us predict that? And that's what we get with passes defended. I actually look at the sum of interceptions and passes defended and just observe that those are all the situations in which a quarterback puts the ball in a dangerous position. And I use that as a metric to figure out how often a quarterback will throw interceptions in the future. And that did really well with interception props in 2023. I'm looking forward to implementing that again this season.
Now, when I was listening to this show, I texted you like, hey, we got to get some season-long interception props posted. And little did I know, they actually are up. There are season-long interception props available at FanDuel Sportsbook. So when you're looking at those season-long INT props, anything you like for this year, Ed?
Yeah, let's look at what number you got on Baker.
Baker Mayfield is at 10.5. Over is -130.
So I really like Baker Mayfield over 10.5. So I actually had so it's 11.5 over at DraftKings.
Okay.
And I actually put it at 12.7 interceptions based on an assumption that he's going to throw 500 pass attempts.
Right.
Baker Mayfield has the worst. Like, Baker Mayfield puts the ball in dangerous positions more than any other quarterback over the last 3 seasons, and it's not really close. Like, for anyone that's thrown 1,000 pass attempts over the last 3 seasons, Baker's the worst at putting the ball in dangerous positions. Will Levis was even worse, but it's more of a small sample size because he was only a rookie last season. TBD whether Will Levis's bad ball rate is going to get any better this season. I think we will see some regression. But Baker, he had a really good year with interceptions last year. He only threw picks on 1.8% of his pass attempts. So that's very good. That's much better than the NFL average of 2.3%. But he really should throw them at 2.5% interception rate. And, I'm assuming 500 pass attempts to get to 12.7. He threw 566 last year. So obviously it's always a little bit dicey to bet an over, these season-long overs because of injuries. But I definitely like Baker Mayfield over 10.5. -130 is a perfectly good price for me to pay for that.
Yeah, and that's always the tough part with the season-long props is you need to make sure you're betting overs. You need that player to play the entire year. With quarterback, it's still risky because quarterbacks do miss games, but it's at least less prevalent than what it is at running back, at wide receiver, and things like that. So you can feel better about them playing for the entire year. So Baker Mayfield's number 10.5, over is -130. Will Levis, I did check him right away. Due to some of the stuff you discussed, kind of his style of play is, I think, conducive to bad balls too, because he chucks it downfield, which is great. It's really fun to watch, but also that's going to lead to more tip passes and stuff like that too. He's 11.5, over is -112. I'm assuming based on the fact that it's a small sample, based on the fact you're expecting some regression, probably staying away from that one, if I'm reading correctly.
I am not sure Will Levis starts every game this season.
Yeah.
So he could come out, he could throw, like, if you want to bet this over, I don't know what my number is, but I'm pretty sure it's in excess of 11.5, given the numbers. Now it's a little bit nuanced because, I do expect some regression. I think he should get better, right?
Yeah.
When you have that much of an outlier of a bad ball rate, it should regress to the mean just because you have a small sample size. Bryce Young had an incredibly good bad ball rate last season. I expect a little regression there too. I don't think he's going to be quite as good as those numbers. Although I expect him to be an overall better quarterback this season. If Levis starts throwing interceptions before the touchdowns come on all these long bombs, like, are you really going to keep Mason Rudolph on the bench?
Yeah.
I don't know what their incentives are. I don't know if they're going to be in playoff contention. It's not a situation like with Baker Mayfield where he has Kyle Trask and John Wolford as his backups.
Right.
I don't think those guys are getting on the field, even if Baker struggles.
Right.
Mason Rudolph, I mean, he showed last year that he can help you win some football games, right?
Right.
So I think there's, as always with a second-year quarterback, I think you have a wide range of results that could possibly happen. I think that range is even larger with Will Levis.
I did want to see if they had an INT prop up for Will Levis week 1, taking on a Bears defense that was very, very good after the addition of Montez Sweat last year. It's not up yet, but maybe check back on those later on to see if we can get a Will Levis week 1 where we're not subject to whether or not he plays the entire year.
Right.
Any week one bets you like, Ed? For NFL?
Yes, there is one, and agonizingly this moved from yesterday, but I like Buffalo over Arizona. You probably have 6.5 now.
6.5. It was 5.5 yesterday.
It was 5.5 yesterday, which is not how it goes. Which is not
Welcome
ideal,
back to NFL.
Look, I mean, I think Buffalo is. I don't know if people don't consider them a Super Bowl contender. I consider them a Super Bowl contender. My numbers consider them a Super Bowl contender. You still have Josh Allen. Obviously, you need to account for the losses of Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. But I expect Khalil Shakir to get a lot more targets this year. He actually had a really good yards per route run, like in the neighborhood of what Diggs was putting up last year. I expect Dalton Kincaid to get a lot more targets this year. I think that offense is going to be fine. I really like the pieces that they have on defense in the secondary. A pretty good unit. I think they're a Super Bowl contender. I think, I was on another podcast talking about, I think there's value in them at 16 or 17 to 1 to win the Super Bowl. Arizona, on the other hand, I am not so convinced about. They do get Kyler Murray back for the full season. He is a quarterback that really struggled last year. His adjusted passing success rate was actually worse than Josh Dobbs when he was the quarterback for the Cardinals last year. His bad ball rate has gotten worse every single season over the last 3 years. You look at that 2021 season where he led them to the playoffs. And then 2022 and 2023 obviously didn't play the full season. And Kyler Murray is one where I wanted to bet his over on the interceptions, but I could not pull for the season, but I couldn't pull the trigger because of the injury risk.
Sure.
And so anyway, my model, this is not the Wisdom of Crowds model. This is another model that I put together based on market win totals. Puts the spread closer to 9. That seems a little high, but I certainly like this south of 7. Sad that it's not 5.5 anymore, but I still like this at 6.5.
Well, I hope that 9 is not too high because I have 9.6. So I'm on board with you. Like,
there you go.
If that's with no market adjustment, because a lot of times you'll regress things towards the market. That's with no market adjustment in, just like the straight up model. Got 9.6. So I'm on board with you. Right. I think the Bills are being underrated right now. I like the Cardinals. I think they're very fun. They're a weird team. I think they'll be enjoyable to watch because their defense is so trash, but their defense is trash. And it's important to keep that part in mind when you're facing Josh Allen on the road, retooled skill core or not. This is still a good, very good Bills team. So I want to buy into the Bills for sure. It's a lofty total of 48.5, but I think that's appropriate. I think I have it at 49 point something. So I've had some unders this week. This is not one of them because I do have a lot of faith in this Bills offense to be able to move the football against Arizona. So bets Ed likes across the NFL. Baker Mayfield over 10.5 interceptions, -130, and the Bills -6.5 against Arizona on Sunday. Let's shift gears and talk some college football. Ed, we had that big game in Ann Arbor on Saturday. It is Michigan taking on Texas. And obviously you understand why the market is where it's at with Texas favored by 7.5, but it's so odd to see the defending national champions at home as 7.5 point dogs the week after a 20-point win. Now, obviously watching that game, a 20-point win, sure, pick 6 helps with that, and maybe it wasn't the most steady victory, but it's still weird, jarring to see where the market is at for this game. So how are you viewing Texas versus Michigan on Saturday?
Right. I mean, this is obviously a marquee matchup, and you could expect regression for Michigan, right? The number of players that ended up getting taken in the NFL draft, you lose your head coach in Jim Harbaugh, you lose your quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. Coming into the season, I actually expected this team to be pretty good, and I expected them to be good at everything except for throwing the football. Now, throwing the football is kind of important, but there were questions because the supposed starter at quarterback, Alex Orji, hadn't thrown a pass in 2 years, right? Played a lot last year, but it was mostly running plays. We get a surprise Saturday, and Davis Warren starts for Michigan. Alex Orji's on the bench. He played, got some snaps, actually threw a touchdown pass, but looked pretty awful on his second attempt. And Davis Warren was pretty good throwing the ball. Maybe not what you expect at a program like Michigan, but I think not so bad for his first start of his career, and I think showed a lot of promise. So I think it really kind of upends what we think about this Michigan team. I didn't think the offensive line looked that good. So with Michigan, you lost almost the entirety of that offensive line, but it's Michigan, and that's really been a strength under that program, under Sharon Moore. You expect them to retool. I didn't think they looked good against Fresno State, but when I went back and looked at the numbers, they actually had a 50% success rate on rushing plays. I think that's pretty good. A result against the Fresno State. The college football average is about 40%. And so the results were there, probably a little bit more in the second half than anything. Now with Texas, actually I should just mention, like I have this about 5.5. So it shows a little bit of value on Michigan. Texas, they come in this season, fourth, very high, and you can kind of understand why. They're bringing the quarterback back in Quinn Ewers. He's got to figure some stuff out with new weapons, but so I actually have Texas as one of my overrated teams at fourth in the country. So there's two reasons for that. Like Texas actually had quite an outlier season last year. So college football teams tend to regress to their program average. You can get a quick estimate of where a program's at by just taking my team ratings. So this is a margin of victory adjusted for strength of schedule. You can get a quick estimate for where a program is by taking an average over the past 4 seasons. I'm not counting 2020. I just kind of pretend that never happened because the ratings were a little fluky for technical reasons that I probably shouldn't get into right now. But so Texas before the 2023 season had an average rating of about 12, maybe 13. And then last year they jumped all the way up to 21. Okay. Now, whenever a program has a 4-year average and then the next season they are 5 points better than that, 75% of those teams regress back. Okay. And the average over actually all those teams is like you decrease by about 4 points. So I'm expecting a little bit of regression. Obviously, like things, Texas is a program that has a lot of financial resources. I think they have a really good coach in Sark. Maybe they can, take the jump, like a Georgia has, and like become one of the top 3 programs in the nation. I certainly think that's a possibility. This quick analysis of how teams perform after they take a jump suggests that they haven't. The fact that they lost 11 starters to the NFL draft also suggests a bit of regression. They lost a lot of really good players to the NFL draft, and they had more players drafted than anyone except for Michigan, right? So I actually don't think. Okay, so I got to be honest. One of the reasons that I picked Texas as an overrated team is it's easier to pick on a team in the top 4 because if they don't make the playoff semifinal, you have a pretty good argument that they weren't that good. But I don't think they're going to perform at the level of a top 4 team this year. So, anyways, that's a pretty long-winded answer of like I think there's. I would definitely lean Michigan plus 7.5 right here. I would expect it to close 7. I think it'll be a tight game. Texas probably wins, but football is a crazy thing, so we'll see what happens.
And a lot of times across college football, we'll see massive movement as a reaction week 1, and a lot of times that can be an overreaction. The look-ahead line here was Michigan plus 3.5. It's now 7.5, and the 3.5 is a lot closer to where your numbers have it, as you have it at 5. So it seems like the market may have moved based on a really good Texas showing in week 1. We got Arch Manning out there for a bit, and I would say underwhelming on the surface for Michigan, but like you said, probably better than it looked for the Michigan offense in terms of success rate and stuff like that. So it kind of feels like the 7.5, just an overreaction to what we saw in each team's opening game.
I think that could be. It's hard for me. I mean, I saw a little bit of Texas at Colorado State against Colorado State. They obviously look fine. Personally, like I've never thought Quinn Ewers looks very confident throwing the football back there. I know that doesn't really mean much because he certainly got the results, and he actually is projected as a first-round NFL draft pick. But yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a true test. There've been some videos surfacing about he won't actually say Michigan as if he were still an Ohio State Buckeye. He just calls it the team up north, which I find hilarious because you're not a Buckeye anymore, dude. You can say Michigan.
Yeah, that's funny.
But yeah, noon kick. It's gonna be awesome. And I can't wait for it to happen.
It'll be a lot of fun. Okay, so Ed is on Michigan at plus 7.5, minus 115 as they take on Texas. Any other college football bets you like across week 2, Ed?
Yeah, let's talk about these Clemson Tigers for a little bit. I'm always interested in these situations in which the narrative perhaps outweighs what's actually going on the football field. So the narrative here with Clemson is that, oh, they don't get any transfers and Dabo's behind the times and he can't fill these holes on his roster and they got stomped by Georgia. But I really want to ask the question whether that game either reflected that Georgia is the best team in the nation definitively or whether Clemson is really all that bad. I feel like it really could be the former. We could be sitting here in January, Georgia's on their way to winning another national championship, and we'd be like, oh man, that was a pretty impressive performance for Clemson to stay in the game for a half against this, behemoth, this juggernaut. Clemson's in a really tough spot because they've found it very difficult to replace Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence at the quarterback position. I think that's what this comes down to. And yes, we can pick it, stuff about the wide receiver position as well. But this is still a program that plays elite defense. I think that will bear itself out. I don't know. I think there might be a little bit of an overreaction over this Clemson team. I think they could potentially do really well. I actually had this whole I had some ideas about talking about Clemson as a little bit underrated simply because there was a lot of bad luck that they had last year. Bunch of turnovers in that opening loss against Duke, bunch of turnovers against Florida State in a game that really could have gone either way, that the underlying metrics look very even, if not in favor of Clemson, if I remember correctly. Florida State's got their own problems right now.
Yep.
But I haven't bet this, but I think Clemson's kind of interesting. My numbers put this closer to 20. App State is pretty good. But I think Clemson will probably be pretty hungry. And I think Clemson is an interesting story here.
All right, that number is 17.5 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. Clemson minus 17.5 against Appalachian State, minus 105 right now. As Ed mentioned, he's got that closer to about 20. So Clemson minus 17.5 and Michigan plus 7.5 adds favorite two bets across college football for week number 2. That's all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread. As a reminder, if you want to find the 60-minute guide to the NFL season, it is in the show notes over on FanDuel Research. Otherwise, just Google 60-minute NFL guide, the power rank. It'll pop up there. You can find a link to the Spotify audiobook there as Ed walks you through his process for betting INT props, the Wisdom of the Crowds model, and more. Ed, anything else going on for you over at the power rank right now?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that you can actually listen to the 60-minute guide to the 2024 football season for free if you have certain Spotify plans. So you can check that out. If you click on the link, it might say included in premium because of your plan, because they have certain plans you can just listen to audiobooks. So definitely check that out. I actually also have a list of other places that you can get it. So you can check that out at thepowerrank.us. So that's a URL that'll take you place on my site that has links to, if you like audiobooks.com or whatever. And then also I'm writing my free email newsletter. Today I will be posting the results of the Wisdom of Crowds model for 2024. It's pretty interesting, Jim. I'm seeing a lot. I'm putting it together now. I'm seeing a lot of sports writers that have Green Bay Packers very high, like second.
Oh,
couple seconds out there. So I'm very interested to see where the Packers end up. I think they are another team that has, pretty high variance in results. So, so check that out. I will actually, even if you don't sign up for this today, we're recording this September 4th. I will have those ratings as like kind of in the welcome email, a little bit of details of how well they've done. So check that out at thepowerrank.com.
And I'm hoping Green Bay kicks things off with a bang because I need them, need their money line plus 132 on Friday night. All right. Again, find Ed on X at the Power Rank. You can check out his work at thepowerrank.com. You can also find the Football Analytics Show wherever you get your podcasts as well. I am on X at Jim Sonis. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Later on today, Dubs Anderson swings by to break down his thoughts on NFL Week 1. And Megan Payton tomorrow talks some player props in the NFL as well. We'll talk to all of you then. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.